Welcome to this online lecture for Western Civ 1. Today's lecture is titled Before Civilization. Now, before we get to the actual material, let me point out a few things that you should look for while listening to this lecture. First of all, I always begin a lecture by highlighting some key terms, some things that you should be able to identify by the time the lecture is completed. These are usually located in the first slide, and here the terms include Homo sapien, Paleolithic, and hunter-gatherers. I also will often include a key question that you should be able to answer by the time we get to the end of this lecture. Both the key definitions and the key questions are meant to guide you as you go through this lecture. It kind of helps you know what you should look for as you go along. So anyway, that said, let's get to it. Let's start this story from the very, very beginning. It is believed that modern human beings emerged sometime between 200,000 and 150,000 years ago. The name for these creatures was Homo sapiens, which refers to their larger brain. The home for these early human beings was Africa. But they didn't stay there. Over the next 100,000 years or so, Homo sapiens were on the move, leaving Africa sometime around 70,000 years ago and migrating into Asia, Europe, Australia, and lastly into North and South America. Now let's move on to another one of the terms that we need to understand. Often when we speak of early human culture, we refer to what is known as the Paleolithic Age or the Paleolithic Era. This period lasted from 2.5 million years ago to about 10,000 years ago. Now, the word Paleolithic refers to the tools used by early human beings. Paleolithic, in fact, means Old Stone Age. The tools created by early human beings included arrows, spears, hammers, fishhooks, and many other things. But stone tools were not the only thing developed by early human beings. Early human beings also domesticated the dog sometime around 30,000 years ago. Why? Well, it's thought that human beings and dogs learned that they could really help one another out. Dogs, with their acute sense of hearing, could provide an early warning should anyone or anything seek to do a band of Homo sapiens harm. They also proved to be very useful when it came to hunting. At the same time, human beings provided dogs with a reliable source of food and warmth. It really was a win-win situation for both species. Another development that occurred during this time was the first artwork. Human beings began to paint pictures on the walls of their caves. Some of the best examples of Paleolithic art was found on the walls of a series of caves in Lascaux, in France. These paintings depict a series of images that show us what these people valued and how they lived. Here on the next few slides are more examples of this early cave art. Here is another example. And yet another example. As you can see, these paintings depict mostly animals, and so you can sort of see how animals such as horses and cattle and bison played an important role in the lives of early human beings. So how did these people live? Well, actually, their world was very different from our own. Much of this was due to the way they got their food. These people did not practice agriculture or herd animals. Instead, they were what was known as hunter-gatherers. So what is a hunter-gatherer? Well, obviously, it's a people that gets its food by gathering wild plants and hunting wild game. But what was life like for a hunter-gatherer? Well, there are a number of characteristics that set these people apart from our own civilized culture today. First, hunter-gatherer communities were very, very small. Typically, they were no bigger than 20 to 30 people. In other words, they probably included 1 to 2 extended families. Now, I'd like you to think about why this might have been. We'll continue to discuss this in class. Hunter-gatherers also tended to be nomadic. In other words, they moved around a lot. Now, once again, I'd like you to think about why this might have been. We'll talk about this once we get back to class. Hunter-gatherers had few personal possessions. Typically, it was only the barest essentials that they carried around with them. Again, think about why this might have been. Most hunter-gatherer bands were roughly egalitarian. In other words, everyone was more or less equal. Why? Men and women in a hunter-gatherer band also were roughly equal. In fact, women played a huge role in these cultures. Why? Now, life for a Paleolithic human being was much shorter than our lives are today. The life expectancy of a man back then was about 35 years, while women died even younger, typically at about 30 years. Nevertheless, it's kind of interesting to look at our society today and our fascination with the diets of Paleolithic people. Many people, in fact, believe that Paleolithic cultures actually lived healthier lives than we do today. There is even an entire diet craze surrounding this belief. It's called the paleo diet, and it emphasizes the consumption of raw fruits and vegetables as well as meat. Grains are avoided, as are any and all sugars and processed foods. In 2013, between 1 million and 3 million Americans were on the paleo diet. That's a pretty big segment of the population. And so they must believe there is something to the way hunter-gatherers lived. Again, this chart will give you some idea of what is allowed and what is not allowed on a paleo diet. I can tell you right now, I would be in trouble if I was on a paleo diet because I eat a lot of stuff on the right side of this chart. In conclusion, early human beings lived lives that are very, very different than the ones we live today. As hunter-gatherers, they did not build cities, nor did they live within anything that we would call today civilization. Why? Well, much of that has to do with agriculture. Early human beings did not plant crops, nor did they raise livestock for food. In fact, the development of agriculture is going to be one of the most fundamental changes in human history. In short, agriculture will change everything. But that's a topic for our next class.